Dai, da, dai, dai, da, dai, 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 dum. Hiddy, dai, 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 dee, dee, dai. Hi, nai, nai, na, 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 nai, 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 yan, na, 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 nai, 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 nai. Hi, hi, na, 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 nai, na, nai, nai. Hi, nai, yan, na, 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 nai, nai, nai. Hiya na 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 na. Hiya da 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 da. Shalom, shalom, beautiful friends. It's great to see you. Excited to think with you today about the psychology of courage. The psychology of courage. Courage is in the air, embracing whiffs, better than all the stalemate ands and ifs, says Robert Frost. Let's start with the poll question. What type of courage do we need most today? Is it option one, the willingness to die for a cause or one's country? Option two, the willingness to be shamed for doing what's right? Option three, the ability to live with hope amidst despair? Option four, the willingness to sit with uncomfortable emotions and not push them away? Okay, all of those may feel important, but which of those feels like we need most today? Okay, wow. 25% say the willingness to be shamed for do what's doing right. 75% say the ability to live with hope amidst despair. I love that. Yes, when there seems to be no good reason to be optimistic, how do we continue to hold on to hope? Courage has historically been revered as a virtue across both ancient and modern cultures. From the chaos of battle to the heart of the public square, individuals who exhibited bravery in challenging situations earned admiration, their stories becoming integral to cultural lore. Whether it's the legendary exploits of the heroes of old, the unwavering determination of civil rights leaders, or the silent strength of ordinary individuals, courage has traditionally been viewed as a cornerstone of one's moral character. Yet, in today's world, this esteemed value seems to be fading, overshadowed by an increasing emphasis on safety and personal achievement, on comfort. Courage can be defined in many ways, but one of the most insightful definitions is considering what a person is willing to risk in order to live in alignment with their values. At its core, courage is not about dramatic acts of heroism. It's about a person's willingness to face discomfort, uncertainty, or danger for the sake of something they believe in. It's the act of standing firm in one's convictions, even when doing so comes with personal cost. Accordingly, courage seems to be one of these universally valued attributes. Simply, we tend to hold courage in higher regard than cowardice in general. What do we think of as a courageous individual? The most succinct way to describe courage is a default image of a soldier on the battlefield. That valiant mental image provides a valid and historically significant shorthand to an unquantifiable virtue that we seek for ourselves. Of course, it should not be the sole image we associate with bravery. Courage manifests in countless ways: speaking up against injustice, taking an unpopular stance, facing one's personal fears, or persevering through hardship. Expanding our definition of courage allows us to recognize the bravery in everyday acts, from the activist fighting for a cause to the individual confronting personal struggles. In many ways, courage is best understood as an action rather than merely a state of being. To be courageous is to engage in behavior that challenges fear instead of succumbing to it. Yet the ability to take action in the face of fear does not come naturally to most people. It requires psychological tools that help manage discomfort. Ironically, many of the psychological strategies we develop are designed to minimize or avoid discomfort. This means that cultivating courage often requires unlearning avoidance habits and actively building resilience. Courage is a complex trait shaped by risk propensity, personality, and moral conviction. While often associated with boldness, true courage is not mere thrill-seeking, but the ability to act with conviction despite fear, uncertainty, or personal cost. Some people are naturally inclined toward bravery, while others develop it through experience and moral growth. What unites all acts of courage is a sense of purpose, whether standing up for justice, protecting others, or challenging the status quo. Personality also plays a key role, with extroverts often displaying social courage by speaking up, leading, and challenging authority, while introverts may show bravery through quiet defiance, perseverance, or intellectual risk-taking. Likewise, agreeable individuals, driven by empathy and kindness, are more likely to exhibit moral courage, standing up for others even when it's difficult. Furthermore, agreeableness alone does not always lead to courage. In some cases, highly agreeable individuals may avoid confrontation to maintain harmony. When combined with a strong moral compass, though, agreeableness can drive acts of profound bravery. Perhaps the most critical personality trait associated with courage is resilience, which is the ability to endure stress, failure, or hardship without breaking. Courageous individuals are often those who have developed the capacity to tolerate fear, discomfort, and uncertainty without retreating. Resilience allows people to confront difficult situations repeatedly without losing faith in their ability to overcome them. It's linked to self-efficacy, or the belief that one's actions can make a difference. Those who believe in their own ability to shape outcomes are more likely to take courageous risks, while those who feel powerless are more likely to stay passive. Interestingly, resilience is not purely an inborn trait. It's cultivated through experience, often emerging from overcoming past challenges. This means that courage is in part a skill that can be developed through repeated exposure to adversity and the confidence that one can survive it. Beyond personality and risk-taking tendencies, courage is also deeply tied to altruism, which is the willingness to act for the benefit of others, even at personal cost. Many of the most profound acts of courage throughout history, from civil rights activism to humanitarian rescues, have been driven by a sense of duty toward others. Psychological research suggests that empathy and moral courage are closely linked. People who are highly empathetic often feel a deep, almost visceral discomfort when witnessing injustice, which compels them to act. This can override their fear of hesitation, leading them to take risks they might not otherwise consider. Harriet Tubman, for example, repeatedly risked her life to rescue enslaved individuals, not because she lacked fear, but because she felt their suffering as her own. Similarly, civil rights activists like the Freedom Riders knowingly placed themselves in danger, enduring violent attacks because they believed in a cause greater than themselves. Like all virtues, courage does not exist in isolation. It must be balanced with other qualities. For instance, unchecked courage can lead to recklessness, which is why it needs to be tempered with wisdom and temperance. A person who takes bold risks without careful consideration is not necessarily courageous. They might simply be impulsive. True courage involves a level of discernment, knowing when to stand firm and knowing when to exercise caution. Even in everyday life, courage is not always about confronting external threats, but also about facing our own vulnerabilities. As Brené Brown writes succinctly but movingly, I can honestly say that nothing is as uncomfortable, dangerous, and hurtful as believing I'm standing on the outside of my life, looking in and wondering what it would have been like if I had had the courage to show up and let myself be seen. It's important to recognize that courage, again, is not inherently good. The act of taking risks or facing danger does not automatically place an action in the category of moral virtue. A person can be brave in the pursuit of an evil cause, just as they can be courageous in a foolish or reckless manner. History is filled with examples of individuals who exhibited bravery in service of destructive ideologies. A Nazi soldier, for example, may have demonstrated personal bravery on the battlefield, but his courage was in the service of a monstrous cause. Similarly, courage without ethical grounding can lead people to take risks for the sake of pride or recklessness rather than principle. A person can be bold in making a dangerous decision without that decision being wise or noble, Take, for instance, a Confederate soldier fighting on the battlefield. He may have shown bravery under fire, but his courage was employed in the defense of a morally indefensible system. This reminds us that courage alone is not enough. It must be directed toward a just and ethical purpose. Courage as a virtue must be understood in relation to justice and wisdom. True courage can not only be about bold action or risk-taking, it's about acting in accordance with what is right, even when it's difficult or uncomfortable. In this sense, courage is deeply tied to the pursuit of justice, requiring individuals and societies to confront uncomfortable truths rather than retreat into convenient narratives. Wisdom, in turn, ensures that courage is exercised with discernment in contrast to recklessness. Without wisdom, courage can become misguided, and without justice, it can serve immoral ends. One of the most profound ways to engage with courage is through the study of history. A serious engagement with history should make us uncomfortable at times. It should challenge us, disrupt our assumptions, and force us to grapple with complexities instead of simplistic binaries of good versus evil. The late James Baldwin wrote, "I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hate so stubbornly is because they sense once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with pain." Let's revisit this quote in a moment. Too often, history is taught in a way that flattens these complexities, reducing figures to heroes or villains, rather than allowing for a nuanced understanding of their actions and their times. Take, for example, Christopher Columbus. For generations, he was presented in American classrooms as a daring explorer who discovered the New World, a fearless adventurer who set sail into the unknown. More recent discussions, however, have focused on the devastating consequences of his voyages, the enslavement, violence, and exploitation of indigenous peoples. The reality is that Columbus was neither a purely heroic figure nor an embodiment of absolute evil. He was a complex historical figure, like most, whose legacy must be examined with both honesty and critical thought, I think. Likewise, indigenous peoples themselves should not be reduced to simplistic portrayals, whether as noble, faultless victims or as primitive, barbaric societies. Indigenous cultures are rich, diverse, and sophisticated, and they, like all human societies, engage in conflicts from alliances and make moral and strategic decisions based on their own interests and circumstances. A meaningful study of history requires us to see them as fully human and neither mythologized nor vilified or romanticized. The problem with oversimplifying history is that it distorts our understanding of heroism and courage. When history is taught in a jingoist manner, it often elevates figures as unassailable icons, while erasing or downplaying uncomfortable aspects of their actions. This kind of historical distortion does not foster faithful courage. It creates a fragile patriotism that relies on selective memory rather than a deep and confident engagement with the past. There's other ways to teach heroism and courage that do not require distorting history. We can teach that courage is not about being perfect or beyond criticism, but about making difficult choices, standing up for justice, and learning from mistakes. Figures like Frederick Douglass, who was born into slavery and fought for abolition, or Abraham Lincoln, who struggled with his own evolving views on race and union, could be studied not as flawless saints, but as individuals who exhibited courage with the moral struggles of their time. Moreover, courage is not solely the domain of great historical figures. Ordinary people throughout history have shown incredible bravery in their resistance to oppression, in their advocacy for change, and in their willingness to challenge societal norms. The civil rights activists who risked their lives for justice, the suffragists who defied societal expectations, and even individuals who quietly resisted in their own small ways, all embody different dimensions of courage. Honor, once intertwined with courage, has also seen a decline. In many cultures, to act with honor meant upholding one's principles despite fear, resisting compromise even when easier paths presented themselves. Yet in today's world, the emphasis has shifted. People often prioritize pragmatic concerns, financial stability, career advancement, and risk avoidance. over living by a strict code of integrity. The question arises, have we sacrificed too much of our moral foundation in exchange for comfort? Let's revisit Baldwin. His words reveal the deep courage required to confront suffering rather than conceal it behind resentment. Hatred offers a false sense of control, a shield against vulnerability, while true bravery lies in emotional honesty and self-examination. To let go of hate demands strength, openness, and the willingness to sit with discomfort, both personally and collectively. In the end, real courage is not found in hostility, but in the power of healing and reconciliation. In Jewish thought, courage is called ometz lev, which translates to heart strength. This virtue is often associated with moral and spiritual courage rather than simple physical bravery. It is the courage to stand up for what is right, even when it's unpopular, the courage to face personal struggles with resilience, and the courage to be vulnerable and truthful with oneself and others. Indeed, cultivating ometz lev means applying our energy to protect and stand up for those who are at risk, including ourselves. Unlike impulsive boldness, ometz lev involves reflection, wisdom, and a deep connection to one's values. Ometz lev is found throughout Torah. The story of Moshe in the second chapter of Exodus offers a powerful example of courage, one that goes beyond mere risk-taking and into the realm of self-discovery, one that we've explored before about how he intervenes in multiple cases. Skipping 3 paragraphs, this theme of courage leading to self-discovery becomes even clearer during Moshe's interaction with the burning bush. When God calls Moshe to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, Moshe does not see himself as capable or worthy of the task. He resists. Who am I that I should go out to Pharaoh and free the Israelites from Egypt? In stark contrast to his previous spontaneous acts of courage, Moshe now faces a monumental courage that will shape his destiny. The stakes are incredibly high. He must venture back to the land where he is hunted, confront the mightiest sovereign of the realm, and guide a community of strangers. The road ahead is shrouded in uncertainty, and his own insecurities threaten to impede his progress. As we see throughout recounting the Exodus, that courage is not only about being fearless, it's about stepping forward even when the outcome is uncertain. This is where the role of hope and faith and courage comes into play. Moses does not take on the mission because he suddenly feels capable. He takes it on because he trusts in something greater than himself. This lesson is mirrored in the actions of the women in the Exodus narrative, who display their own form of courage. Consider the example of Miriam and the other women of Israel. Jewish tradition recounts them as the Israelites prepared the escape from Egypt. These women took their tambourines with them, convinced they would eventually dance in joy on the other side of the sea. This act exemplifies remarkable faith. During the Exodus, the Israelites faced an uncertain fate, with no assurance of survival or guarantee that they would successfully navigate the tumultuous waters of the Red Sea. Nevertheless, their hope was so profound that they chose to carry their musical instruments. Their bravery was not manifested through combat or rebellion, but rather in their steadfast belief that a brighter future awaited them, even in the absence of a clear and secure path ahead. Moshe's journey displays painfully that courage is transformative. Every act of bravery, whether it is standing up against injustice, stepping into an unknown role, or holding hope in dark times, is also an act of becoming. But as we also know, courage comes in many forms, and Jewish tradition offers a broader definition than the conventional image of the warrior on the battlefield. One of the most common and striking images of ometz lev is Nachshon ben Aminadav, who, according to the Midrash, was the first to step into the Red Sea before it parted. While others hesitated, waiting for divine intervention, Nachshon took action, showing that courage is sometimes about having faith and moving forward even when the outcome is uncertain. His act of bravery was not about defeating an enemy, but about demonstrating trust, leadership, and a willingness to act before guarantees of success were in place. While courage is often associated with military heroism, the rabbis of the Talmud offered an inspiring alternative vision. In the Talmud, Ben Zoma asks, who is mighty? Ezehu Gibor. The answer, Hakovesh et Yitzro, one who subdues their evil inclination. It's about internal restraint. The aphorism challenges the notion that physical strength alone defines courage. Instead, the mightiest person is not one who conquers others, but the one who conquers themselves. Self-restraint, moral fortitude, and the ability to master one's desires require an internal form of bravery, one that is often harder to cultivate than physical prowess. Now let's go further, friends. Expanding on this idea, the Midrash presents another radical perspective. Who is the heroic one? The one who turns an enemy into a friend. Now, to be sure, it doesn't say an evil one into a friend. One's enemy may be evil, but they may not be. They may just be someone that we've had a long tension with. This reframes heroism from being about domination and conquest to being about reconciliation and healing. True courage in this view is not about destroying one's foes, but about bridging divides, fostering understanding, and transforming hostility into friendship. This definition of heroism challenges traditional notions of victory, suggesting that the most enduring triumph is not in battle, but in peace. Both ancient and recent history provide striking examples of individuals who embodied this courageous approach. In the 1970s, Egyptian President Anwar Sadat and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin took immense risks to achieve peace between their nations. For his work in seeking peace with Israel, Sadat was assassinated for his efforts, demonstrating the extreme personal danger that sometimes comes with the pursuit of reconciliation. Similarly, 2 decades later, Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, who worked towards a lasting peace between Israelis and Palestinians, knowingly put himself at risk by challenging entrenched hostilities. His assassination in 1995 was a tragic demonstration of the high cost of pursuing peace in a world that often glorifies conflict. During the commemoration of his fallen partner and friend, President Bill Clinton remarked, "In the Knesset, in your homes, in your places of worship, stay the righteous course." As Moses said to the children of Israel when he knew he would not cross over into the promised land, "Be strong and of good courage. Fear not, for God will go with you. He will not fail you. He will not forsake you." Throughout history, courage has manifested in countless forms, each shaped by unique psychological underpinnings. In ancient Persia, Esther's journey from palace comfort to active leadership exemplifies how courage can emerge through profound identity transformation. Initially living as an assimilated Jew from her people's suffering, Esther faced a critical turning point when Mordecai challenged her with his famous words, "Perhaps you have attained royal position for just such a crisis." This catalyst forced Esther to reframe her self-perception from a powerless queen to a leader with moral responsibility, enabling her to override her fear of death and approach the king uninvited, an act that could cost her life. Mordecai's own defiant courage stemmed from an unwavering internal locus of control, his refusal to bow to Haman, boo, rooted in non-negotiable dignity and faith. Centuries later, the Maccabees demonstrated how courage could arise from collective identity when facing cultural erasure. Under the oppressive Seleucid Empire, the resistance wasn't merely military, but deeply psychological. As external forces attempted to dismantle tradition and desecrate the temple, their Judaism paradoxically strengthened, a phenomenon cognitive dissonance theory helps explain. The pressure to assimilate activated a powerful need for autonomy and self-definition, transforming their resistance into an assertion that identity itself was worth the ultimate sacrifice. Jewish history also provides intellectual examples of courage, such as the Disputation of Barcelona in 1263. Particularly popular in Europe during this era, disputations were formal religious debates between Christian and Jewish scholars, usually sponsored by sovereign authorities. These discussions were seldom balanced exchanges of ideas. Instead, they aimed to coerce Jewish participants into abandoning their beliefs or conceding points that favored Christianity. The Disputation of Barcelona stands out notably. I won't get into all the details. Fascinating case. Perhaps no example illustrates desperation-driven courage more powerfully than the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising of 1943. Knowing survival was nearly impossible, Jewish resistance fighters chose active defiance over passive submission to death. Through the lens of terror management theory, their actions represented a profound assertion of dignity in the face of inevitable mortality. By reclaiming agency in their final moments, they refused to internalize victimhood, instead choosing to write their own ending through resistance and transforming death from humiliation into defiant meaning. During the Cold War era, Natan Sharansky's psychological endurance in Soviet gulags demonstrated how moral conviction could sustain courage through extreme suffering. Despite solitary confinement and psychological torture, Sharansky's resilience and unwavering belief in Jewish freedom and human rights provided immunity against despair, while his ability to reframe suffering as meaningful sacrifice allowed him to withstand conditions designed to break his spirit. American history is rich with examples of courage. As mentioned, Harriet Tubman exemplified exceptional risk tolerance and fear mastery, repeatedly returning to dangerous territory to lead others to freedom after escaping slavery herself. Her courage can be understood simply. Rather than being paralyzed by past trauma, she transformed it into a resolute purpose. Her deep religious faith likely played a neurological role as well, as spiritual belief can diminish fear responses in the brain, providing an internalized sense of divine protection that enabled her to face constant threats of capture or death. Going to skip over some examples around Abraham Lincoln and Rosa Parks, freedom riders. More recently, the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg's judicial courage took the form of persistent dissent, standing alone against the majority when necessary. Her psychological profile as a justice of Supreme Court reflected exceptional grit, combining passion with perseverance over decades of fierce legal decisions. She understood in her own way that societal progress often moves at an incremental pace. Though she faced an onslaught of criticism from ideological foes, she nevertheless maintained emotional regulation and resilience against criticism and her internalized sense of justice, which prevented this discouragement when immediate victories proved to be elusive. Because courage is often associated with physical danger, we sometimes overlook its more subtle forms. The courage to speak an uncomfortable truth, to stand alone against peer pressure, or to embrace vulnerability in relationships can be as significant as battlefield heroism. Moral courage, intellectual courage, and emotional courage are all vital in shaping a strong and ethical society. Courage is not merely the ability to face physical danger. It's also the willingness to take ethical and emotional risks. Speaking out against injustice, pursuing an unconventional path, or standing firm in one's beliefs despite opposition all require courage. If we condition people, especially young people, to avoid discomfort, we may be raising a generation less willing to challenge the status quo or take meaningful risks. The consequences of this shift are already visible in broader society, where fear of failure prevents many from trying new things, and reluctance to face discomfort leads to self-censorship and avoidance of necessary conversations, while in workplaces, innovation suffers as employees hesitate to take bold steps, and in relationships, people shy away from honesty to avoid conflict, leaving progress stalled and individuals confined within self-imposed limitations. The erosion of courage has profound implications for social change, as historically major movements for justice and equality required immense bravery from those who resisted oppression protested for civil rights, or exposed corruption, raising concerns about whether future generations will have the strength to stand against injustices demanding moral action. Okay, going to skip some content to move forward a little here. People can foster courage in their everyday lives by taking small yet meaningful steps and meaningful risks, such as voicing an unpopular opinion, confronting a deep fear, or stepping beyond their comfort zones. While these actions may appear minor, they gradually strengthen the muscle of nerve. As individuals learn to embrace discomfort, they enhance their capacity to tackle larger challenges with greater confidence. To create a future where individuals embody integrity, chase their dreams without hesitation, and advocate for what is right, we must once again prioritize courage as a fundamental virtue. While success and security are not inherently negative, lacking the courage to balance them can lead to complacency instead of true fulfillment. It is time to restore the importance of bravery, not only in times of crisis, but in our daily lives. Courage transcends mere physical acts. It encompasses the readiness to navigate uncertainty, control one's impulses, turn adversaries into allies, and speak the truth even when it poses significant risks. Both Jewish teachings and the broader tapestry of history remind us that true heroism is found not only in the battlefield, but also in acts of faith, self-discipline, peacemaking, resistance, and moral clarity that contribute to a just and compassionate society. So friends, in essence, courage is not a singular quality, but a nuanced interplay of risk assessment, personality traits, and moral beliefs. Some individuals may naturally gravitate towards bold actions, while others cultivate courage through life experiences and necessity. At its heart, courage is not the absence of fear. Rather, it is the resolve to act in spite of it. It empowers individuals to confront what is wrong and take risks for the greater good. Whether expressed through physical bravery, moral defiance, or steadfast perseverance, genuine courage is always linked to a sense of purpose, the conviction that one's actions hold significance beyond the immediate context. Courage transcends mere confrontation with fear. It embodies the commitment to align our actions with our core values, even when the path is fraught with challenges. Not every risk is justified, nor is every brave act inherently virtuous. Yet genuine courage manifests in standing firm for what is just, even in the face of hardship. By embracing a more truthful and complex understanding of history, we nurture critical thought and moral introspection, inspiring individuals to view themselves as engaged participants rather than mere bystanders. And indeed, Jewish tradition teaches that the source of courage lies within each of us, in our very heart. History reveals that it's often the brave who propel societies forward, whether through acts of heroism, defiance, or steadfast endurance. Courage is not reserved for extraordinary occasions. It's woven into daily decisions that cultivate a life rich in purpose and integrity. Nelson Mandela embodied the definition of courage, noting that I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. I felt fear myself more times than I can remember, but I hid it behind a mask of boldness. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. Rather than allowing fear to paralyze him, Mandela transformed it into strength, emerging from prison not with bitterness, but with conviction. To conclude, courage possesses the remarkable ability to reshape both society and the individuals who embody it. Every act of bravery, regardless of its scale, strengthens a person's sense of agency, demonstrating that resilience can be developed through experience and determination. It is not merely an innate quality, but a way of thinking, one that drives transformation and advancement. Okay, dear friends, I would love to hear from you.
Okay, so these are interesting stories going back to it. Business relations with courage, where employers set up an environment where people thought so strongly about something. They could step forward and bring it to the attention, and without the risk of, say, repercussion. One was over 50 years ago in a factory situation. where an employee decided particular machinery was dangerous to the people working there. And we're talking 1973, 74. He actually went to the owner of this company with 600 employees, but he knew them because they grew up together in the small town. And the guy said, "Are you sure?" He said, "Yes, you have to see this." And the guy took one look at the machinery and turned to his treasurer and said, "What would it cost to make these changes?" It was about $75,000, which was a lot of money in those days. And the guy said, "Do it," because the employee knew it was wrong, but that the employer had a culture that allowed people to step up and tell the truth. The second one was I worked for someone and I discovered something. And I went to him, and he was a very hands-off owner. And he looked at it and said, "You realize you're criticizing the third person who I hired in this company years ago. How strongly do you feel about this? Because if you're right, he will get fired and everyone will blame you." And to me, it was a black and white issue or something serious. And I said, "I'm willing to take the heat." He spent 4 hours investigating, called the guy in and fired him on the spot. I worked for him for 20 years, and I took the heat for 6 months. And it wasn't, I was courageous, but in both cases, someone gave the employee or the individual, how do you give someone the strength, the courage to step up in a situation, knowing there are few, if any, repercussions for doing the right thing? And it's something I've tried to do with people to encourage them to step up and tell the truth, because they're going to find out anyhow. But two very, very, not real courage in the classical sense, but how do you step up and say to an owner of the company, you got to fire the third person you hired after 20 years? It's not that he was stealing money, but he was doing something that was causing significant losses. And if the owner of the company could be on the hook for hundreds of thousands of dollars for something this guy didn't do, and it was continuing. So I don't know if I was courageous, but he gave me the ownership to be able to step up knowing that he would support you. And I think that's also a lesson in courage, that you encourage people to do the right thing.
Very nice, Matthew. Great, thank you for sharing those great examples. Fascinating. Hi, Ken.
Wow, there were so many things you talked about in this session, even though you skipped so many things as well. What I wanted to focus on was you're talking about how how you have to accept every person from the way they are, that no one is perfect. I mean, and I was, when you said that first, I went right back to Moses, who really embodies that, for all the good that he did and the importance he is to our people. He obviously was not a perfect person. He had lots of faults. Obviously, God recognized that and didn't let him into the Holy Land. But he still managed generally to make the right choices, and how hard it is often to tell what the right choices are, to even know, which side is the right side. I watched Born on the 4th of July last night, which is an old Tom Cruise movie from the mid-'80s, in which he plays a Vietnam war soldier who's paralyzed in Vietnam and comes back. And while he exhibited all kinds of immense courage in becoming a soldier and volunteering back in the earliest days of the war, he did some horrible things, as many soldiers do, and recognized at points the guilt for causing the deaths of civilians. And then it was a small number of civilians, but it still the courage in recognizing that what he did was wrong is sometimes very hard to do, because at the end of the day, it's really not acceptable to be killing civilians in a war, to be killing women and children, as even if you were intending to kill soldiers, it's still an evil thing to do. And he had the courage to recognize that, which is, I think, often a very hard thing to do, to recognize that at the end of the day, even though I thought we were moral in our side of the war, we didn't fight the war in a moral way.
Wonderful example, Ken. Thank you for sharing that. Very profound, and something we can all think about as we reflect on our lives and things we've been complicit in that we can revisit. Thank you. Yes. Hi, Janie.
Hi. I'm with everybody else this morning. There's so much that you covered, so much to think about. I want to preface my questions with saying that I'm a Zionist for many, 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 many reasons. And while you were speaking today, I was thinking about the political history of Israel and where we are today. And I'm going to ask you to respond, if you would. There were two thoughts that you gave that led up to my thinking about this. First, you said there's no courage without we can't have courage without moral grounding, and that there should be a just and ethical purpose. And my immediate thought was, who decides that it's just and ethical? I'm sure politically the people that do not agree with me feel that they have a moral grounding. I don't see a bit of it, but I'm sure they are convinced that they do. The second thing that led to my thinking about this was the Ometz Lev, applying our energy to protect and stand up for those at risk, including ourselves. And I think that's a lot of what's happening in Israel today. So here's my question. In the historical context of modern Israel, you talk about going from dominance to reconciliation, and that's the transformation. It seems to me that in the last 10 years, although the history of Israel since 1945 seems going from a sense of dominance to reconciliation, now Israel is being forced into a position of dominance or self-preservation. So how does that impact how we feel about courage?
Okay, that's a fascinating question, and I'm so glad you raised that. And I'm sure we have a range of views here, and I invite folks to weigh in on this. And here I'm going to speak less from myself and more with my sociological observations, which is that the high majority of Israelis for decades were pro-peace. They supported Oslo. They supported peace talks. You always had settlers and kind of more extreme right folks who were opposed to those talks, but most supported the disengagement from Gaza. I was living there at the time, 2005, when Israel forcibly removed Israelis from Gaza who were living there, built their lives there. And Israelis supported all these peace talks, with various countries and with Palestinians. Israelis have moved drastically to the right and become radically disillusioned with peace talks, thinking they're completely fruitless. There is no peace partner on the other side, and feel they are forced into a dominant situation. They feel, of course, we don't want to, occupy territories with forced military and be viewed globally as an occupied force, on innocent, largely innocent populations of Gazans or those in the West Bank, but we simply have no choice. Now, there is the far right who says this is good, and there is the far left there who still says we got to pull out today. But the high majority of Israelis feel totally disillusioned and feel there's no option but to do this. That to simply, remove military presence and control would be catastrophic. As October 7th showed, it would just continue that. And so to your question, and again, I welcome folks to challenge any of that. It's very easy from the comforts of America, to just be a peacenik. Oh, and be an idealist. Oh, two-state solution tomorrow, because why not? I believe in peace. Well, I mean, if you live there, it's a very different reality that's hard for us to grasp from here. And I lived in the West Bank for 2 years in a caravan on the hilltop. And so on the front of bravery, I think part of goes back to the poll question we started with. I think part of bravery here is to hold out hope amidst despair, right? I don't think we should be filled with despair, even though there's no issue. I would say there's two issues I hold most despair on today in the world. I don't think we just get diplomats back at the table. We talk about two states and we're going to get there somehow. I don't think that's the pathway anymore. You've got over 600,000 settlers living beyond the Green Line. And you have very religious people who are totally disillusioned on both sides, Palestinians and Israelis who are religious, disillusioned with secular diplomats who don't speak for them. And so I think that that number one is to hold hope when there's not a lot of reason to have hope. Number two is the courage to continue dialogue. When there are reasonable Muslims, reasonable Palestinians, peace-loving people in those categories, not just ideologues, to continue to talk. I think that's number two. I think number three is the courage of battlefield. These are 18, 19, 20-year-old Israelis who are giving up their lives for a war that feels purposeless and endless at this point in Gaza. Now at the point of still feeling like Hamas has to go, but also feeling deep distrust for the Bibi administration, feeling like a lot of gray area around how and when this needs to end. And I know a lot of Israelis share that sentiment of young kids continuing to die on both sides without an endpoint. So it's, I think, but there is the courage of battlefield. The courage of the hostages who are in there struggling to survive, the courage of those advocating for them, the courage of people like you in the Democratic Party who are committed to that party, but also willing to stand against the dogmas of the day that prove oftentimes to come out harshly anti-Israel, I think is a huge courage. And I think also the courage of those of us in pro-Israel camps to also challenge some of the dogmas in those camps, to say like, yes, we support Israeli security and Israel's right to defense, and we should also ask hard questions about what that looks like, from within those spaces. So anyways, that just scratches the surface. And I continue to think that those who hold the exact same view post-October 7th as they did pre-October 7th are fools, right? If it did anything, it should humble us to ask questions about what we believe about peace and how to get there. If someone leaves with the exact same conclusions about the reality, I think they didn't learn anything. So anyways, Janie, I want to give you a chance to respond to some of those things I shared.
Well, I was just sitting here nodding my head. I felt like a bobblehead, but yes, absolutely. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for raising that. And I think it's a really profound question because I think that's exactly right, that bravery changes in each era. And if we don't allow it to change with new realities, then it becomes a vice rather than a virtue. Right. Courage has to be tied to wisdom and continued analysis of new realities. So, anyways, yes, Ken, I see your hand reemerge. Would love to hear from you.
So just a continuation of what I was talking about earlier,
yeah.
But it also reminded me of something in the middle of your talk about how the courage to make an enemy your friend. And I was thinking about the way the First and Second World Wars ended. So after the First World War, and what one can can argue about who the good guys were in the First World War, because it's not at all as obvious as in the Second World War. The First World War was, in my mind, mostly a mistake of alliances. That assassination and the idea of putting down that rebellion and having the arguments between the Germanic people and the Slavs, which then caused the English and the French, because they had a alliance with Russia, to come join in this to support, a government that was clearly not a democracy in any way. And then for us to argue later that this was a fight between democracies and non-democracies, which is all nonsense. But at the end of the war, the French insisted that the Germans be, put in their place and pay huge reparations and do all kinds of things. And that led to horrible conditions inside Germany, which led to Hitler at the end of the day. So that's what trying to put your enemy in its place did. And then at the end of the Second World War, we have the opposite reaction, actually, the Marshall Plan, in which we did all we could to rebuild Germany, to rebuild Italy, to rebuild Japan. And for 50 years, 70 years now, those countries have been our allies until this new administration, when we don't have any allies anymore. But we had 70 years of peace by making Germany our friend, by treating them as human beings, by, generally having a way. Now, we then bring that to Israel. The attempt to make the Palestinians subjects rather than co-equals, both in the West Bank and even within Israel itself, does not give the Palestinians a good reason for trusting the Israelis to be a peace partner. And at some point it becomes the dominant partner who has the ability to show more courage. And unfortunately, for all kinds of political reasons, that's not been the policy of Mr. Netanyahu. And it's led to, I don't think anyone can argue that October 7th was anything but a horror, for all sides, for all peoples. And it was, but it was a reaction to how the Palestinians were being treated. It was the absolutely wrong way to do that, but you cannot make a friend by subjecting them, by making them your subject, by trying to prevent them from having political power, which was the entire purpose of Netanyahu's government, to do anything he could to not have a partner for peace, to keep Hamas alive so that it would be a counterbalance to the PLO or the PLA or whatever their name is today.
But so a number of insights you've shared here, Ken, which I appreciate, of your analysis of the aftermath of World War I, the aftermath of World War II, and the current conflict, and what it means for the more dominant party to play a unique role of courage, and also this desire to make an enemy into a friend, and the more powerful partner having a heavier share of that responsibility, and the current mess we're in, and our withering of allies in this tragic American administration, not understanding that strength and courage is demonstrated not through isolation but through partnership and trust, and we're withering and we're breaking that down, and the courage to stay in relationship with partners that we disagree with or have tension with, rather than just make everything into competitive and shaming situations. I very much appreciate. So friends, we have a lot to leave with today, and I hope we'll continue to reflect on this, not only as of our analysis of national and global issues, but in our own circles, in terms of how we're educating kids and grandkids and communities, and how we're modeling this ourselves. Some of us might have courage in our own health battles or in our own, political engagement. And maybe we have some other ways, even quieter than that. But I wish us all strength, the strength of courage. And I look forward to seeing you all again next week. If I don't see local folks volunteering tonight, if I'm able to get out of something and be there. And if I don't see you next week, we are going to be talking about the Hawthorne effect, an interesting phenomenon around how our behavior changes when we are viewed from outsiders. Do we act differently when we are seen rather than we are unseen? Look forward to that. Have a beautiful day and see you soon. Also, Thursday, we have a VBM class. Have a great day. Bye-bye.